Hello and welcome to my presentation on cyber economic crimes and Commonwealth laws. My name is Dr. Claire Chambers-Jones and I'm an Associate Professor at the University of the West of England. There are various aims of the presentation today. Firstly, to raise awareness of the Commonwealth legislation for cybercrime, especially financial cybercrime. To discuss the Commonwealth legislative approach, to outline the case studies and examples of cyber financial crime, and to consider the future of cybercrime legislation. This all relates to part of my work as the Commonwealth Cybercrime Working Group. In 2011, the Law Ministers asked the Commonwealth Secretariat to appoint a working group to review the Commonwealth Model Law on cybercrime. Throughout the last couple of years, we have been working on reviewing the model law and other various cybercrime pieces of legislation in the Commonwealth, and we are due to report back to the Law Ministers in 2014. This is just a small part of the project. So firstly, what is virtual financial crime? Well, the first thing to say is that it's a real and present threat to society. Interpol have stated that it is one of the fastest growing areas of crime as more and more criminals exploit the speech, convenience and anonymity that modern technology offers in order to commit a diverse range of crimes. Field Fisher Waterhouse solicitors also said that the law doesn't just stop because this is a virtual world, but with its borderless nature it may be challenging to determine whose law apply. And there's a culture of anonymity, so it is often difficult to know whom you are dealing with. So there are a couple of questions here. One, are there laws relating to virtual worlds? And two, what are these laws? And if there are, how can we create laws? If there are none, can we create laws that still comply with the rule of law? It is true that the law often lags behind technology, and this is certainly the case in virtual worlds and social networking sites. Cybercrime can be described as any criminal activity having taken place via the internet, smartphone or other electronic means. Virtual financial crime is part of this cybercrime. It is where financial crimes such as fraud, money laundering, scams, etc. take place on the internet. It is all part of this cybercrime umbrella. So what are the problems of cybercrime? Anonymity is one of the largest issues that gives law enforcement agencies issues and problems. Domestic laws can apply, but the crime is committed across a multitude of jurisdictions. As Interpol states here, the global nature of the internet allows criminals to commit almost any illegal activity anywhere in the world, which makes it essential for all countries to adopt their domestic offline controls to cover crimes committed in cyberspace. So therefore, Interpol is stating that to combat this new wave of criminal activity, domestic governments should tailor their domestic real-world laws to fit crimes that are being carried out in cyberspace. This has two important issues. Firstly, law enforcement agencies are acknowledging that there is a real threat of financial crime being committed over the internet. Secondly, that because the virtual is a continuum of the real, domestic laws should be applied to the virtual worlds. However, this causes problems of its own. With the internet crossing a multitude of boundaries and therefore laws, it is unclear as to which domestic laws should apply in the instance of crime. There are no international standards which have to be met. So moving on, before we discuss the nitty-gritty of cyber economic crime, let's look at what virtual money is. We can see here Interpol have defined virtual money as money value represented by a claim on the issuers which is stored on an electronic device and accepted as a means of payment by other persons other than the issuer. Therefore, the digital currency can be used by the criminal to either launder or commit fraud. Virtual money can be said to be real money. It is an encrypted code representing money, which is accepted to be money. It's the same gradual acceptance by society which ascribes the encrypted code as having monetary value. There are two types of virtual money: identified virtual money and anonymous virtual money. Identified virtual money is able to be identified as belonging to someone and that it was withdrawn from a banking institution. In other words, it's traceable. Anonymous virtual money, or what is known as virtual cash, is untraceable. Once it is withdrawn, it leaves no discernible trace. There are plentiful criminal activities which can then take place with this untraceable money. I'm often asked, well, what types of crimes can take place in a virtual world on the internet that involves money? And on the bottom of this slide and on the next slide, I've listed a couple of criminal activities that have been known to take place. So, for example, a crime that can take place is an unauthorised creation, transfer or redemption of virtual money. Secondly, criminals can criminal access to computer systems being used to change illicitly the attribution of funds within the system. Thirdly, criminal attacks on virtual money systems leading to a loss of virtual money value or loss of function on the virtual monetary system. Fourthly, criminals' misuse of virtual money systems for financial crimes or as a tool to subvert or misuse other financial systems. And finally, for the purpose of this presentation, this example of criminals may use virtual money to reduce the likelihood of capture, for example, in the cases of blackmail, kidnapping or extortion, where in the past collection of money has been problematic for perpetrators. This is particularly significant for anonymous virtual money. This slide here shows you a couple of the cases of cyber financial crime that has been located. Criminal avenues have been thwarted by law enforcement agencies. So you can see here gold farming, virtual money, e-gold, Western Currency Exchange Company, attorney turned launderer turned compliance analyst, Sony Online Entertainment and the Shadow Crew Ring. Today we're just going to go through a few of these just to give you a flavour of the crime syndicates that are presently at work. So gold farming. What is gold farming? Basically, it is where a group of people get together, normally in Asia, and they are asked by their employers for a remittance of the equivalent of pence per day, per week, and they have to play a online player game, multimedia online role-playing game, and buy assets such as swords, win goods, win things that are important and that are valuable within the game. They will then be able to sell these goods that they've won or spent ages working through the game and being rewarded with for money. And this money is then cashed out of these virtual world games for real world currencies. The player doesn't actually get the currency. As I said at the beginning, they are paid a pittance for their long hours at work during the day, and this money goes to the syndicate that are running these, often peasants, who are working for them. That money is then looks like it's come out of a reputable source and can be used to for proceeds of crime. They can be used for illegal activities. Money can also be put into these games, online games, and have from proceeds of crime and can be then used within the game to buy, sell and launder the money, and then get the money out again for which has been laundered and appears to be clean. So most of this is often small amounts of anonymous virtual money going in and out. It is hard to find and it's hard to locate for money laundering purposes. But it is big business and can earn gold farmers a lot of money. But it doesn't earn the peasants who are working a lot of money, and they are often kept in abhorrent conditions. Gold farming was actually banned in China in 2008 because gold farming saw an effect on the real world currency. If we think back to my first quote, cyber financial crime is a real and present threat, and we've seen it have an effect on real world currencies. E-gold was a digital gold currency which traded gold and allowed the instant transfer of gold between users until 2009. E-gold was owned by Gold and Silver Reserve Inc. and traded under e-gold. In 2009, trading was suspended because of the illegal trading activity, and its owners were indicted under money laundering regulations. E-gold was known to authorities as being a safe haven for money laundering, online con schemes and fraud. E-gold also had strong links to the Shadow Crew ring, which I'll come to later. In July 2008, E-gold and its 3 directors pleaded guilty to conspiracy to engage in money laundering and conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmitting business. Later in 2008, Gold and Silver Reserve CEO Douglas Jackson was sentenced to 300 hours of community service, a $200 fine and 3 years of supervision, including 6 months of electronically monitored home detention. It was said that the judge was lenient on him because he was not aware of the illegal activity and because he was deeply in debt at this time. I'll leave you to your own conclusions as to whether that is sufficient enough for organising a online money laundering ring. Here we come to the Shadow Crew ring. This is one of the most complex and large international crime syndicates, and it operated between 2002 and 2004 through an online message board, the shadowcrew.com. This message board assisted criminals with illegal activities and to provide a meeting place where illegal goods and services could be traded. The United States Secret Services took down the organisation in 2004 after a year-long undercover operation. The online site was a haven for criminals to sell and purchase stolen online accounts, email addresses, eBay accounts, stolen identities, to name but a few. In 2006, Andrew Mantovani, one of the leaders of the Shadow Crew, was sentenced to 32 months in prison, a $5,000 fine and 3-year probation. Again, not a lot of punishment for the crime. So why am I considering the Commonwealth for cybercrime laws? Well, there are 3 different types of legislation or model law which are applicable to Commonwealth countries. So all Commonwealth countries do have access to these pieces of legislation. So firstly, the Commonwealth Model Law on Computers and Computer-Related Crime, the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, which is a European convention, and the Scheme of Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters, otherwise known as the Harare Principles. So let's look at these in more detail. The Commonwealth Model Law on Computers and Computer-Related Crime, so we'll just call that the Model Law. It is based on the assumption that the internet will be used increasingly for criminal activities. It was created in 2002. The aim of the Act is to provide the integrity of computer systems and the confidentiality, integrity and availability of data prevent abuse of such systems, and facilitate the gathering and use of electronic evidence. The jurisdictional issues within the model law provided a cross-jurisdictional widening scope of the law, thereby giving the model law a wide scope of jurisdiction, which is important when it comes to criminal activities on the internet because of the jurisdictional problems. The model law could be said to be outdated, and in 2011 the Perth Law Ministers meeting agreed to form a working group to consider modernising the law. Although it is some 12 years out of date, it is a useful piece of law. It provides a good starting point for looking forwards into the future and using it. The wording of the model law is phrased liberally, so it could encompass advances in technology, but it still doesn't cover the main aspects such as cloud computing, virtual worlds and social networking, which are main protagonists in cyber economic crime. But it is a good piece of law. There are three things we are looking at. Firstly, does the law need reforming? Secondly, what is the application of the model law in Commonwealth countries? Is it being used? If not, why not? And if not, what do these countries use? And also, thirdly, the training. Are judges trained? Are law enforcement agencies trained within these Commonwealth countries to detect, prevent and prosecute cyber economic crime? The Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. The model law is based on this European Convention, and it is one of the most prolific and wide-ranging pieces of cybercrime legislation that we have. It provides for more direct and progressive legislative measures, in my opinions, and it provides for cybercrimes in Article 7 and Article 8. There is also multi-jurisdictional cooperation provided for in Article 25, 26, 31 to 34. Although it is still 12 years old, it is the most comprehensive legislation, and it is important because the model law of the cybercrime in the Commonwealth is based on this. So we need to look at whether reforming or reintroducing the model law, which is based on this convention, is the way forward. As mentioned, the scheme on mutual assistance in criminal matters, or hereafter the Harare principles, is where we get our criminal procedures and logistical arrangements from. As you can see, it has been amended in 1990, 2002 and 2005. Therefore, it is the most modern piece of model law or principles that the Commonwealth has in this area. It has a more modern application. It brings together logical thought and cooperation on criminal matters in the Commonwealth. And we can see that Section 1.3 to 8J provides assistance between countries on criminal law matters, which can include, under Section 14 and 15, computer data sharing. So it does include modern definitions. These principles are still considered effective, especially for cybercrime. If we look at Section 11, whereby any request made for assistance in any case of criminal matters and mutual assistance shall be kept confidential. This is interesting because of the multi-jurisdictional issues of cybercrime. If there is an account of cybercrime being committed, it is important to inform all possible jurisdictions of this in a timely fashion. By having confidentiality, this would allow time to pass and jurisdictions not to take action. Section 28 is also important when considering cybercrime as it relates to the tracing of proceeds or instruments of crime. The scheme lays out that requests can be made to countries seeking assistance in identifying, locating and assessing proceeds or instruments of crime. This is important for law enforcement agencies to obtain information and assistance in other jurisdictions because of the complexities of cross-jurisdictional crimes occurring. Now let's look and take two different countries within the Commonwealth and see how they are using the model law and the Harare principles and the Convention in their own domestic legislation, because at the start of this presentation I made a point that domestic legislation is the key at the start of this process at combating cyber-economic crime. So the countries that I have chosen are Australia and Nigeria. Australia being a developed country with a good level of financial crime legislation, and Nigeria, a developing country who is striving to eradicate the high levels of financial crime and corruption in the country. Transparency International, who monitors levels of corruption within countries, have ranked Australia as 8th and Nigeria as 143rd in the world, with 1 being the best. PricewaterhouseCoopers' 2011 cybercrime report indicated that Nigeria was among several countries who were perceived as potential countries where cybercrime could originate from. Perceptions as well as facts can be damaging to countries' reputations as well as their economic outlook. Therefore, effective legislation prevention, deterrence and detecting cybercrime is essential not only for developing countries but those who are developed as well. The 2001 Act gives cybercrime a narrow definition, with a wider definition pertaining from the European Convention on Cybercrime, and as such the 2011 Amendment Bill seeks to address some of the differences between the 2001 Act in Australia and the Convention. So if we look closely, there is the Cybercrime Act of 2001 in Australia. In 2011 there is a Cybercrime Amendment Bill, and it makes various amendments to various legislation, and this seeks to address the differences between the EU Convention and the 2001 Australia Act. In 2009, Australia launched a strategic framework to ensure Commonwealth agencies work together in the prevention of organised crime. Cybercrime can now be seen as falling under the remit of organised crime and terrorism, and therefore has always and especially been at the forefront of government's agenda since 9/11 and 7/7. The Australian government adopted the Commonwealth strategic framework approach and forged links between other Commonwealth agencies to prevent, disrupt and investigate Commonwealth organised crime. The ideology is to pool resources, and this is essential when it comes to looking at cybercrime. Australia has also implemented additional legislative measures to combat serious and organised crime, this coming in the form of the Serious and Organised Crime Act 2010. However, this doesn't mention cybercrime specifically, but it can be interpreted widely enough to encompass cybercriminal activities. If we move on to Nigeria now. So Nigeria has a bad image as a hub of organised and cybercrime, and it is working hard at putting national measures in place. The reason for doing this is to ensure their economic growth over the next coming few decades. In 2005, the Financial Intelligence Unit in Combating Financial Crime, or the NFIU, was created as part of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, Article 14 and 58. The NFIU draws powers from various legislation, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission 2004 and the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2004, but neither of these mention cybercrime. So, what was created was the Computer Security and Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Bill 2005, or otherwise known as the Cybercrime Bill. The The Cybercrime Bill does not distinguish between serious offences and minor misdemeanours, and this is the problem with this bill, because this could conflict with Article 37 of Nigeria's constitution. And Article 37 is where Nigerian people have the right to a private and family life. Therefore, it is going against their human rights protection of private and family life. The bill still sits at the National Assembly. The bill is a long way off being implemented unless various issues within the law can be rectified. This goes to show how difficult drafting cybercrime legislation could be. It is not just cybercrime that needs to be considered, but human rights, sovereignty and jurisdictional issues. So, what happens to the future? What are we going to do? How are we going to create legislation which tackles all of these? In 2010, Judge Stein Scholberg proposed the Cyberspace Treaty to the United Nations. It was rejected. Cybercrime reform is on the Law Minister's agenda for the Commonwealth, and we are working hard at looking at the best possible approach forward. But what we do know is that an international cooperation and a joined-up approach is needed. Training is needed. Implementation of what we already have in Commonwealth countries is also needed. We're due to report back to the Law Ministers in 2014, and I'll be able to update you on our future recommendations in due course. But for now, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please contact me on my email claire.chambers@ue.ac.uk, or you can always follow me on Twitter @.chambers. Many thanks. Bye bye.